Sinking 2 years after the Titanic is the shipwreck we will be discussing today, the Empress of Ireland. Often overlooked due to its chronological proximity to the sinking of the RMS Lusitania and the start of World War I, the Empress of Ireland took more passenger lives than both the Titanic and RMS Lusitania. Join Maia and I as we delve into our first shipwreck. So hop into our morbid time machine and let's get into it. Welcome inquirers, new and old. Have you ever wanted to go down a rabbit hole of morbid history, but you don't know where to start?
Then you are in the right place. Our Grim Past is a podcast where each week we explore messed up history.
From shipwrecks and spooky places to morally questionable people and practices, we're Sophia
and Maia.
Join us in our morbid time machine
And let's discuss history's most fucked up.
Hey, Maia!
Hi, Sophia!
Okay, I don't know about you, but did you ever go through a Titanic phase?
I went through a very specific Titanic phase.
Okay.
It wasn't like overall, like I wasn't too into watching the whole movie of Titanic. I was into the shipwreck. But for the movie, I was specifically so invested in the fact that both of them could fit on the door.
I just watched the Mythbusters version of that, and then a different Mythbusters, because like the Mythbusters were like, oh yeah, you could totally do it, and then it was like, well no, you actually can't do that.
Yeah,
it was like
there's been like research, like studies on it, like to try to prove it, because people are so like crazy about it. Where because it's the argument is they think, oh, two people can fit on that door, but it's wood or like wood. It's a door, isn't it?
It is wood. It is a door. It's like
it's a wood door.
It's a wood door. Yeah,
so it's like wood that have floated and kept both of them on it, and it's like we don't really know. Like it possibly couldn't have. So they like took. Some of the research took like crazy counts, like what type of wood would it have been on the Titanic? Yeah. Or like crazy things like that.
And like I saw one that was like, well, even if they both would have fit, would they have survived the hypothermia?
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, they both fit, but they probably wouldn't have survived the hypothermia of
and the door
being in the water.
Yeah, the door would have like flipped and stuff. Yeah. Also, it's just a very romantic act. Feels so like, but also for the real Titanic, I thought it was crazy that the orchestra played through the whole sinking of it, and I was like, okay,
like kind of slay. Like,
and there's also like with all the statistics about the Titanic. Do we have a Titanic episode later?
Probably.
Okay, but basically, it's like there's some people who are like, it's not actually sinking, and they stayed on the ship and died because they were like, it's because the Titanic was like this amazing boat, and everyone was like, oh my god. But it sunk.
Yeah.
So.
No, yeah. I also had a pretty big Titanic phase. I don't know what it is about elementary schoolers and their obsession with the Titanic. But I swear everyone in my elementary school went through a Titanic phase. One of my friends actually brought a really cool Titanic book for show and tell one time that had like pictures and like little plastic recreations of like some of the artifacts found, which I was like, oh my gosh, that is the coolest thing ever to my little kindergartner brain. But yeah.
Guess who I did my elementary thing on?
Who?
Marie Antoinette.
Marie Antoinette?
It started that young, you guys. Yeah, so...
Kids like the morbid history.
I loved it. I read this crazy... Sorry, I will always talk about Marie Antoinette, but I read this really cool... I don't know if they had it in your school library, but it was like... It was not like Princess Diaries.
No, it was. It
was for like Princess Diaries, and I love the Marie Antoinette one. I read it like 3 times.
I had the Queen Elizabeth one, the first, and I was like obsessed with looking at all of the wives and being like, okay, so that one was her mom, but those are the other wives. But like the pictures on them were so pretty.
I like that the like the edges were like gold and it had a bookmark. I was like, I'm so fancy. So you guys, you can tell it started young for me.
Well, did you ever have I think it was like the Letters to America series?
Maybe.
It was similar to like Princess Diaries.
Yeah.
But it was like immigrants and immigrant stories.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
I've read a few different ones. I also went through like a World War II phase and World War I phase.
Didn't.
I read this really we're going way off topic.
We are, but it's fine.
But it's this book, I'm pretty sure that's literally just called like Making Bombs for Hitler. I don't know if you know that one.
Yes, no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So plot overview, it's this young Jewish girl who like she like with her family, and like they get hidden by her friends, but then they get caught, I'm pretty sure, and then they get split up she gets split from her parents and she's with her younger brother, I think. And then her younger brother gets adopted by like a rich family, but she doesn't. And she's put in like a concentration camp, and then she starts like she has to start making like bombs.
Dang.
But what it is that her and like the girls in the bomb factory fill the bombs sometimes with just like sand. Like they don't fill it with like powder, and like their hope is that less people will die, but they can't get like caught doing stuff. And so it's really interesting. And then I think the end of it, she's like put in like a bunker, and then Allied soldiers come and find her. It's really interesting.
Huh.
I was like, that's crazy. But I also read a lot of World War II books at that time, so I might be mixing some of them up.
I remember what that series was called. It was called Dear America.
Okay.
Yeah, Dear America, the Dear America series. Yeah. Because I think it wasn't just immigrants. I think there was one of the books was like an enslaved child. We read some interesting books as kids.
Yeah. There's also this one, I can't remember the full plot, but I remember the book cover. It was like this guy in a giant top hat, and it was like he was a necromancer or something. And it was super interesting, but it was like a kid, like not a kid's book, but it was like you'd read it like 5th or 6th grade. But it was like this whole thing where it was these kids and they found this like weird guy who like time travels. It was so good. And it was basically that like this one guy died, but he was still around.
Huh.
Ish. But it wasn't him or something.
Interesting.
And it was so good.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so
way off topic. But it's fine.
It's fun, you guys.
It is so fun.
This is the point of the podcast, to just start discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the early morning of May 29th in 1914, the RMS Empress of Ireland sank in the St. Lawrence River near Rimouski in Quebec after colliding with another vessel. But let's take this back to the beginning. So, the Empress of Ireland and its sister ship, the Empress of Britain, were built in Glasgow, Scotland by the Canadian Pacific Railway Company, who wanted to get into the business of transatlantic travel because that was a pretty lucrative business. Both ships made their maiden voyages in 1906, and they were 570 feet or 170 meters in length, 65 feet or 20 meters wide, and had a depth of 36.7 feet or 11.2 meters.
Huh?
Throughout its life, the Empress of Ireland made 95 successful transatlantic runs, transporting over 170,000 immigrants both to and from Britain. So it was on its 96th transatlantic run when Empress of Ireland came to its end. Kind of the price range to get onto this boat. So third-class tickets cost around, back then, £6.50, which in today's US dollars would cost around $1,217. Second-class tickets back in 1914 were £10. Again, in US dollars today, that would be around $1,872. And then first-class tickets were around £14 in 1914. And then today, in US dollars again, that would be around $2,621.
And guys, I'm the one that crunched those numbers.
Yes, you did. Thank you, Maya. So first-class rooms were located in the upper deck and lower promenade decks. Second-class rooms were located in the stern of the lower promenade decks. And third-class rooms were located below deck. So, let's talk about that fateful morning. The captain of the Empress of Ireland that morning was Henry George Kendall, who had decades of experience as a captain. And then there was also, as mentioned before, it was a collision, so there was another ship involved, and that was the SS Stornstad. The SS Stornstad was a cargo ship that transported coal from Britain to Canada. It was 440 feet or 134 meters long and 58 feet or 17 meters wide. And it was made specifically to be able to carry extreme weight over long distances. On the morning of May 12th, Stornstad was carrying 11,000 tons of coal and was traveling very low in the water. The Stornstad was traveling upriver while the Empress was traveling downstream. The facts on how the collision happened are highly debated due to the conflicting stories from survivors. What is known, however, is that shortly before 2 a.m., fog rolled across the St. Lawrence River, obscuring the visions of both crews. While both crews did make an attempt to acknowledge each other's locations on the river due to the fogs, those locations were distorted, and the Stornstad was headed directly towards the Empress. Regardless of any attempts to move out of the way, the Stornstad struck the Empress between funnels and tore a 16-foot vertical gash in the hull.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So the Stornstad and the Empress did try to plug the hole with the Stornstad.
Yeah.
But due to the momentum of the crash and the current, the ships drifted away.
Oh.
So at that point, the Empress began taking on water at a rate of 60,000 gallons per second, and the SOS signal was then sent out to operators. The Stornstad immediately began deploying lifeboats to start a rescue effort, as well as other boats in the area, but ultimately 1,012 lives were claimed by the sinking, and 840 of them were passengers.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, and then both survivors and their bodies were taken to Rimouski, where the survivors were treated and the bodies were identified. So the other kind of crazy thing about this story is the Empress was actually equipped with enough lifeboats to save everyone.
Yeah.
But it just happened so quickly that they were unable to deploy, which is why so many people died. And that is also one of the reasons why it's kind of debated why it was forgotten, because they did everything right, but still it caused a lot of passenger casualties. And again, like as I mentioned before, it costs more lives. It took more passenger lives than both the Lusitania and the Titanic. And if you don't know, the Lusitania was the passenger ship that was hit with a German U-boat that caused World War I. After this, the disaster led to the change in the design of a ship's bow, bringing the pointed stem up to the deck, whereas previously it had been below the waterline.
Interesting. And for this, I don't know if you found this in your research or if this is just a topic for our listeners to explore, but it's since the bodies were able to be identified and taken back, does that mean they were able to find majority of the bodies, I wonder? Because for the Titanic, a lot of them were lost at sea.
So I know some of the bodies were lost at sea, but not all of them. But it was also a river, so it wasn't quite as deep. But now the site of the sinking is a National Historic Site in Canada. They have a little buoy above it so that no one really disturbs the wreckage.
Oh, that's nice. Shout out to buoys.
Shout out to buoys. Shout out to Canada.
For real, Canada's amazing.
So there is also an existing plaque, which is in the Marine Museum in Pointe-au-Père in Quebec, just kind of commemorating the event. This was actually the worst maritime disaster in Canadian history. So it was a big deal for the Canadian government and the Canadian people. There were quite a few notable people aboard the ship during its sinking. One of them, Henry Seton Carr, who was a British explorer, and he was a parliament member in the House of Commons until 1906. He was last seen handing off his own life vest to another passenger, so it's assumed that he drowned with the ship. And then there was also Lawrence Irving, who was a Montreal millionaire, and his wife. They were actually on their way to their honeymoon. Oh. And they were seen clinging to each other as they leaped overboard, but both drowned tragically.
Yeah. That's kind of a crazy way to try to escape. But
I mean, if they're like, we can swim.
true.
But the water, it is also stated that the water was frigid, or it might have been too, like, not as calm as they thought.
Yeah. There's an interesting story I found about two brothers, Stanley James Baker, who was born in 1898, and then his older brother, Thomas Henry Baker, but he was known to his family as Harry, who was born in 1895. And then in 1914, both of the brothers were serving on the Empress of Ireland. Stanley was a bellboy and Harry was a steward. And while the ship was sinking, the brothers were on either side of a sealed door, and Stanley was on the side leading to safety, but Harry was on the one that was not safe. And Harry pleaded with Stanley to leave him behind and save himself. Stanley listened to his brother, and he did survive, but he never got over the loss of Harry and the sacrifice he made.
Wow.
Yeah. And actually, after the sinking, Stanley went back to sea and became a second officer, and he got married in 1924 and then died in 1987.
Oof.
Yeah.
That must have taken a lot of guts.
Yeah. Like that, just like thinking about that, like with your siblings, that just is insane.
Right.
And then another story I would like to bring out is Henry George Kendall, which we've talked about already, who is the ship's captain. So he was born in London in 1874. His family moved to Liverpool after he was born, and then he joined the Empress of Ireland in 1907 as a chief officer. He served as a captain on several other vessels and then took charge of the Empress in 1914. He was on the bridge of the boat when the collision occurred and was watching the Stornstad when the heavy fog came down. He was unable to see, so he ordered engines astern and sounded the ship's whistles, indicating that the Empress was backing. In the fog, it was hard to judge where the other vessel was, and he ordered the Empress to be stopped, gave a warning whistle, and then the Stornstad emerged from the fog, ships collided, and everything. He ordered that all hands to be alerted, lifeboats prepared, and everything, and then when the Empress gave her final lurch, Kendall was thrown from the boat into the river as the ship sank. He was rescued by lifeboat number 3, though, and then once in the boat, Kendall took charge, and in time, over 60 people were taken from the water, while even more clung to the lifelines.
Wow.
Yes. And then he returned to work as the Marine Superintendent at Antwerp, a shore-based position, and then died in London in 1965.
So bro did not go back out on the water.
No, he did not.
Honestly, fair. So fair.
But he still worked with, like, maritime stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's gotta be a bit scarring.
Right?
Especially for, like, the captain. Like, I understand why Stanley went back. Because, like, I guess he could. Maybe it was also a bit of, like, guilt because he lost his brother on the water. But as a captain, that must be hard to, like...
Yeah, because, like, you're in charge of everyone. Well, and the other interesting thing, too, was the Stornstad's captain and his wife, who was with him at the time, were actually... They had retired to bed at 10 p.m. the night before. So it wasn't even the captain, the Stornstad's captain, who was, like, on deck. It was the first officer, which is, like, kind of crazy. And it's like, well, I wonder if he was still up, would that have happened?
Yeah, it's crazy to think about.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening. Next week's episode is going to look a little bit different. As a huge thank you to our launch team, we are letting one of our lucky launch team members choose our topic for next week. We'll be sure to announce that on our Instagram later this week. Thanks for listening. Bye. Thank you for joining us today. As always, all sources will be listed in the show notes below.
Be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out on our upcoming discussions. Join us next week as we delve into the intriguing depths of our grim past.
Stay curious. There's so much more to uncover.